Hello everyone, welcome to the course of history. My name is Rocio, and in today's video we are going to look at the different Native American cultures that emerged in the North American continent. And those include the Anasazi, who were the ancient Pueblo people, the Adena, who flourished in the Ohio River Valley, and also the Olmec, the Maya, and the Aztec of Mesoamerica. So the Native American story begins about 14,000 years ago during the Ice Age, and because the climate was much colder than today, water was frozen into large glaciers, which meant that sea levels were significantly lower and more land was exposed. These conditions allowed people to migrate from one continent to another, and during this time bands of nomadic hunters came into North America by crossing over a land bridge located between Asia and Alaska. So after they crossed over, they moved into the interior of the continent and settled all throughout North and South America, and these nomadic hunters are called Paleo-Indians, and they are considered to be the first Americans. Paleo-Indians had no permanent settlements because their livelihood depended on the large animals that they hunted, and so their life was very mobile and they had little time to focus on other things but finding food. Some of the animals that they hunted included the woolly mammoth and bison. Around 8000 BCE, the large animals that the Paleo-Indians hunted became extinct and the Ice Age ended, and so the Paleo-Indians had to adapt to a new way of life. The period following the Ice Age is referred to as the Archaic Stage, and Native Americans in this period relied on hunting and gathering techniques for subsistence. These Indians were semi-nomadic and made seasonal moves depending on the types of food that were available in the different locations that they lived at. So the new environment in the Archaic Stage brought new and diverse food sources, and Native Americans in this period began supplementing into their diet fruits and nuts that they gathered from the various locations that they stayed at. And they also began hunting smaller animals like deer, rabbits, and turkeys because the animals that they hunted in the previous stage were now extinct. And they also began fishing and collecting shellfish as a food source. The end of the Archaic Stage varies by location, but it is defined by the adoption of sedentary farming, and this allowed Native Americans to settle down into permanent towns and villages, and also to focus less on hunting and gathering as their means for survival. The Adena culture flourished in the Ohio Valley in the early Woodland period. They lived in small villages and cultivated a variety of crops in their gardens. Squash, sunflowers, maygrass, and other native plants were part of their daily diet. The Adena also hunted deer and other game for subsistence, used pottery, and also made jewelry from exotic materials. The Adena people also built earth mounds, which were used to bury their dead. Each mound had multiple burial sites of both commoners and leaders, and this practice was adopted by the Hopewell, which were the Adena culture's predecessors. The Anasazi were a prehistoric Native American culture that flourished in the Southwest. They were the ancestors of the Pueblo people, and sometime during the Archaic Stage, small groups of Native Americans settled the area, now known as the Four Corners. The Anasazi were fine basket makers, and they used these baskets to gather and store food. Their economy was based on gathering wild plants, primitive farming, which included the cultivation of corn, squash, and cotton, and also hunting small animals for food. The Anasazi lived in semi-subterranean pit houses that provided protection from the hot days and cold desert nights, and these underground houses were reinforced with posts, and access into the house was through the roof. So after 450 AD, agriculture played a larger role in the lives of the Anasazi. They developed irrigation systems and began cultivating new crops like beans. The Anasazi also began domesticating turkeys and using pottery. The Anasazi eventually moved above ground and lived in towns and villages. One of these towns was Pueblo Bonito, located in Chaco Canyon, which was a major center for trade, commerce, and religion. And at its peak, Pueblo Bonito had 800 rooms, 37 kivas, and housed roughly 1,000 people. But by 1150 AD, residents abandoned Chaco Canyon and spread all throughout the Southwest. Another important site for the Anasazi is Mesa Verde, and here the Anasazi built apartment-like homes called cliff dwellings. These homes were only accessible by ladder and provided protection from enemy attack, but by 1300 AD the people of Mesa Verde abandoned the site, and this ended the ancient Pueblo people era. The Olmec were the first major culture in Mesoamerica, and around 1200 BCE, villages located in the fertile lands of present-day Veracruz, Mexico, came together to form the Olmec culture. Most of the Olmec lived in villages and cultivated corn, which originated in Mesoamerica, and they also grew squash and beans for subsistence. This complex society were the first to develop a writing system using glyphs, a calendar, and a numbering system. The Olmec also built two ceremonial centers, one in San Lorenzo and the other in La Venta, which became the focal point of Olmec civilization. These centers featured great pyramids, stone temples, ball courts, and the famous colossal heads. The Maya were another major civilization in Mesoamerica, and they flourished in the jungles of southern Mexico and Guatemala. They lived in small homes made of wood and thatched roofs and cultivated a variety of crops like corn, beans, squash, and chili peppers for subsistence. The Maya were not a unified empire. Each city was an independent city-state ruled by a king who had a connection to the gods. Mayan society was divided into three classes: the ruling class, made up of the royal family and other prominent people in the city; the middle class, made up of the artisans, traders, and merchants; and the commoners, which were the majority of the population. The Maya excelled in many areas. They developed a writing system using hieroglyphs, the concept of zero in mathematics, two calendar systems to track time, and a great understanding of astronomy, including the orbit of Venus and the tracking of constellations. By 900 AD, Mayan urban cities were abandoned. Warfare, drought, and the misuse of resources could have all contributed to their decline, but the real reason for their demise is still a mystery. The Aztec people migrated to central Mexico in the early 13th century. After seeing an eagle perched on a cactus on an island in Lake Texcoco, they saw it as a sign to settle the area, and by 1325 AD, their capital city, Tenochtitlan, was constructed. In 1428, competition for power and influence led the Aztec to form a triple alliance with the Texcocans and the Tacubans. Through military conquest, they were able to defeat their enemies, expand the empire, and to demand tribute payments from the conquered city-states. Religion was very important to the Aztec, and they worshipped a number of gods, including Huitzilopochtli, the sun god. The Aztec offered human sacrifices to him to ensure that the sun moved across the sky. The fall of the Aztec Empire came in 1521, just 2 years after their first encounter with the Spanish. The Aztec nor any other Native American culture could have imagined the changes that would take place following the arrival of the Europeans to what they called the New World.